This is how I've changed the injectors on a parts car, which I'm just sort of keeping running and in order. I did this for the exercise, not being something I'd done. It took all up about probably 2 hours for me. So you start by removing the air filter housing with the 2 butterfly clamps, one at the front and one at the rear. The vacuum line is then removed to take off the air filter. Now the 6 injectors are on the left or passenger side of the heads, and you can see front and rear of the mount with a central bolt. That's all that holds them in. The last set near the window or the firewall are the hardest to get out, but still not too hard. You can see on the injectors there's an injector at the front and rear and a single 13mm bolt holding the mount down, which is all that holds the injectors in. And so to commence with, just starting with a 14mm wrench to loosen the injector line, which is actually very easy. You just break it and then moving on to the next. And then ultimately these lines can usually be done with finger pressure only. The mount is held on by a 13mm nut on the first 2 and last 2 set of injectors, whilst the middle cylinders, it's actually a 13mm bolt that's going into the head. After the mount nut is removed, the mounting just comes off with a little bit of fiddling. You can see one end on the camera, one end on the mount. And then the injectors actually just simply come out of the sleeve. Now ideally the sleeves are replaced, they're not expensive, but at the time they were 4 weeks away, and because this is a parts car, I have ordered them, but I just thought I'd change the injectors at this point anyway. And you can see they're pretty filthy. Now ideally they're bench tested to determine the injector pressure, and sometimes they can be cleaned up, but for the sake of the exercise I've bought 6 new Bosch injectors. They're not prohibitively expensive, and now I'm just moving on to the next set. So you'll see on the middle 2 cylinders coming up that there's the 13mm bolt instead of a nut, and this is actually holding a little bracket, so do remember to put that back on once the mount is off. Now you can see once we move forward a little bit, the other 4 cylinders have the injectors out, and you will see the sleeves here and forward, and they have a little rubber O-ring which becomes brittle and leaks with time. I would like to acknowledge this website, mercbenz123.com, which actually had a good write-up on this and has some good pictures, so thanks very much. I couldn't actually leave a comment on your site if you ever get round to seeing this. So here is the old and the new injectors. Those separate black seals need to be ordered at the same time. They're not part of the injector, so do remember that. Putting the injectors in is actually quite straightforward. They simply slot into the sleeves, and once they're in you just replace the mount and then go in reverse. Note when the mount goes on, the hexagonal injector sides fit into the mount, so the injectors need to be lined up to slot into that nice and flush. Now the middle two cylinders, after the mount's gone on, you have to remember to attach there's a little mounting for another wire that gets retained by the bolt. I'm not quite sure what that was, but just line that up and remember to fit that there. Being the last cylinder, now ready to tighten it up, reconnect the battery and start the car, which actually you'll hear started far simpler and actually idled much better. And I'm sorry, the air filter housing really makes it a lot noisier without it being on.